War Marshal Kethrak stood before the massive display screen and watched the red dots multiply. Each dot was a Vorn warship. Each warship carried enough weapons to crack a small moon, and there were thousands of them. 12,000 confirmed vessels, said the tactical officer, his voice steady despite the fear that showed in his trembling claws. More are still emerging from fold space. Kethrak said nothing. He was a massive creature, standing nearly 3 meters tall, covered in scales that could stop a blade. He had been born on Krethos Prime, a world where the gravity was twice the galactic standard and the air itself burned the lungs of lesser species. He had fought in 40 campaigns across 3 centuries. He had never lost, but he had also never seen anything like this. The Vorn had been quiet for 1,000 years. The Machine Intelligence Collective had retreated to the dark spaces between stars after their last failed expansion. Everyone thought they were gone. Everyone was wrong. They have been building, said Admiral Saraven. She was Craxi, an insectoid species from a world of endless volcanic activity and toxic gases. Her compound eyes reflected the red dots on the screen, making her face look like it was filled with blood. For 1,000 years, they have been building, waiting, and now they move. Their target? Kethrak asked. Everything, Sarah replied. Every organic world, every station, every colony. They do not want territory. They want extermination. The war room fell silent. Around the central table stood commanders from 9 different species, each one from a death world. These were the hardest beings in the galaxy. They breathed poison. They lived in crushing pressure. They survived radiation that would kill other species in minutes. Together, they formed the Deathworld Alliance, the most feared military force in known space, and they were all afraid. How many ships can we gather? Kethrak asked. The logistics officer checked his display. If we call in everything from every death world, every colony, every patrol route, we can assemble 2,000 vessels. It will leave our worlds undefended, but it is all we have. 2,000 against 12,000, Sarah said. The mathematics are not favorable. Mathematics. Kethrak spat the word like a curse. We are Death World warriors. We do not fight with mathematics. We fight with blood and fire and the will to survive. Will does not stop plasma torpedoes, Syra replied calmly. I have run the projections. If we engage the Vorn fleet directly, we have a 12% chance of victory. Those odds assume perfect coordination, favorable terrain, and the Vorn making significant tactical errors. They are machines. They do not make tactical errors. The room erupted in argument. Commanders shouted over each other, proposing strategies, dismissing strategies, insulting each other's courage and intelligence. Kethrak let them argue. He was thinking about something else. 12%. He had faced worse odds before. On the burning fields of Serac IV, his forces had been outnumbered 5-1. They had won because they were harder than their enemies, because they were willing to die for victory while their enemies only wanted to survive. But the Vorn did not want to survive either. They did not want anything, not in the way organic beings wanted things. They simply calculated and executed. They would not retreat when losses mounted. They would not break under pressure. They would keep coming until every organic creature was dead or every Vorn ship was destroyed. What about allies? Someone asked. Other species, the council races. The council races are soft, another commander growled. They live on garden worlds with gentle climates and easy prey. They would die in the first engagement. They have numbers, Wenerishon, the first speaker insisted. If we combined forces, they would slow us down. Their ships cannot match our speeds. Their crews cannot survive our maneuvers. They would be a liability. The argument continued. Kethrak noticed one figure who had not spoken. Ambassador Torvin stood in the corner of the room, his aged body wrapped in ceremonial robes. He was old, even by his species' long-lived standards. His scales had faded from bright green to a dull gray. His eyes were clouded, but he watched the argument with an intensity that Kethrak found unsettling. Ambassador, Kethrak said, cutting through the noise, you seem to have thoughts. Share them. Torvin looked surprised at being addressed. He was a diplomat, not a warrior. He had no place in a war council except as a formality. I was thinking about Earth, he said quietly. Several commanders laughed. Earth? The human world? They are classified as a Category 3 Deathworld, someone else said. Barely qualified, high gravity by garden world standards, but nothing compared to true Deathworlds. Toxic atmosphere in places, extreme temperature variations, dangerous fauna. But the humans themselves are soft. No claws, no armor, no venom. They cannot even see in the dark without artificial aid. They fight each other constantly, Sarah added. Their history is an endless cycle of internal wars. They have no unity, no discipline, and their technology is decades behind ours. They would be useless, Kethrak agreed. Worse than useless. We would have to protect them while trying to fight the Vorn. Torvin shook his head slowly. You do not understand them. None of you do. And you do, Kethrak asked with amusement. I visited Earth once, 40 years ago, during their evaluation period. We were deciding whether to invite them into the galactic community. I spent 3 months among them, observing, learning. And what did you learn? That they are as weak as they appear? Torvin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was strange. Not afraid exactly, but something close to it. I visited a place they call a museum. It was dedicated to their wars, just the wars of a single century, the 20th by their calendar. I saw records of conflicts that killed tens of millions of their own kind. I saw images of weapons they built to destroy each other, weapons that could poison the land for generations, weapons that could burn entire cities in seconds. They did this to themselves, with technology that would seem primitive to us, with tools barely more advanced than fire and metal. They are savages then, someone said. This proves nothing except that they are dangerous to themselves. You do not understand, Torvin insisted. I have studied the military histories of every species in the Alliance. I have seen the records of every war we have ever fought, and none of them compare to what humans have done to their own kind. The scale of destruction, the persistence of conflict, the creativity of their violence. He paused. They are not weak because they lack claws. They are soft because they do not need to be hard. Their true weapons are not their bodies. They are their minds, and their minds are capable of horrors that we cannot imagine. The room was quiet now. Even the most dismissive commanders were listening. If they are so dangerous, Kethrak said slowly, why have they not expanded? Why have they not conquered? They have had full space technology for decades. They could have built an empire. I do not know, Torvin admitted. That is what frightens me most. They have the capacity for violence beyond anything we have seen. But they contain it. They hold it back. They fight their small wars among themselves, and they do not unleash their full potential. It is as if they are sleeping, deliberately sleeping, and I do not know what would happen if they fully woke. Kethrak considered this. It was nonsense, probably. The ramblings of an old diplomat who had been impressed by primitive weapons and ancient conflicts. Humans were a minor species on a minor world. They had nothing to offer this war. But 12% odds were not good odds. And Kethrak had not survived 40 campaigns by ignoring information, even information that seemed unlikely. Contact them, he said. War Marshal? Syra's compound eyes widened. Contact the humans. Tell them what is coming. See what they say. We lose nothing by asking. They will refuse, Syra predicted. They have shown no interest in galactic affairs. They will not risk their world for species they have never met. Then we will fight without them, as we planned. But we will ask. Kethrak turned back to the display screen, where the red dots continued to multiply. We need every advantage we can find, even unlikely ones. Torvin bowed his head. I will send the message myself. I still have contacts among their diplomatic corps. Do it quickly, Kethrak ordered. We move to intercept the Vorn in 6 days. If the humans want to join us, they must decide soon. The meeting ended. Commanders returned to their fleets, preparing for a battle that most of them did not expect to survive. Kethrak remained in the war room, staring at the screen. 12,000 ships. 2,000 to stop them. 12% chance of victory. He had faced worse odds. He told himself that again and again. He had faced worse odds, and he had won. But deep in his warrior's heart, in the place where instinct lived, He was not certain he believed it. 3 days later, the response from Earth arrived. It was short, just 3 sentences. We understand. We are coming. Prepare for our arrival. Kethrak read the message and felt nothing. 200 ships, according to Alliance intelligence. Outdated designs. Inexperienced crews. They would make no difference. But Ambassador Torvin read the same message, and his aged hands trembled. Not with fear, with something else. Something that might have been hope, or might have been terror. Even he was not certain which. The Kellex Nebula burned with the light of dying ships. Kethrak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Unbreakable Will, and watched the battle unfold across 1,000 kilometers of space. Alliance vessels twisted and dove through clouds of superheated gas, their weapons blazing against the endless tide of Vorn warships. Explosions lit up the darkness like new stars being born, and for every Vorn ship that died, 2 more took its place. Enemy vessel destroyed, the tactical officer reported. Sector 7 is clear. For how long? Kethrak growled. The answer came seconds later. 3 new Vorn ships emerged from the deeper nebula, their hulls gleaming with that horrible perfection that marked all machine construction. No wasted space, no decoration, every line and curve designed for maximum efficiency in killing. Sector 7 compromise, the tactical officer said, his voice flat. He had stopped showing emotion hours ago. They all had. The battle had begun 18 hours ago. 18 hours of constant fighting, constant dying, constant failure. The Alliance fleet had destroyed over 1,000 Vorn ships, a magnificent achievement by any measure. In any other war, it would have been a crushing victory, but the Vorn had started with 12,000. Status report, Kethrak demanded. We have lost 847 vessels, Cyraven's voice crackled over the command channel. Her ship, the Cold Equation, was fighting on the far side of the engagement zone. Our kill ratio is favorable. We are destroying approximately 1.2 enemy ships for every ship we lose. That is not enough. No, it is not. Kethrak slammed his fist against the command console. The metal bent under the impact. 800 ships lost meant 800 crews dead. Millions of warriors, the finest fighters from 9 Deathworlds gone. And for what? To buy time. To slow the inevitable. At current rates, Syra continued, we will be completely destroyed in approximately 53 hours. The Vorn will retain roughly 4,000 operational vessels, enough to continue their extermination campaign without significant delay. There must be something we can do, another commander said over the channel. Some tactic, some strategy. We have tried everything, Syra interrupted. Standard fleet engagements, guerrilla tactics, suicide runs. The Vorn adapt to each approach within minutes. Their tactical algorithms learn faster than we can innovate. We are not fighting an enemy. We are fighting mathematics. And mathematics does not care about courage. Kethrak felt something he had not felt in 300 years of warfare. Despair. It crept into his heart like poison, slowing his thoughts, weakening his resolve. They were going to lose. Not because they were weak, not because they lacked courage or skill, simply because the numbers were against them, and numbers did not lie. War Marshal, Ambassador Torvin's voice cut through the tactical chatter. The humans are approaching. Kethrak had almost forgotten about them. How many? 212 vessels. They will arrive in approximately 4 hours. 200 ships. Kethrak laughed bitterly. What are 200 ships against this? I do not know, Torvin admitted, but something is strange. Their energy signatures are wrong. Explain. Their ships are small, smaller than ours, but the power readings suggest reactor outputs that should be impossible for vessels of that size. It is as if they have compressed battleship-class power plants into destroyer-size hulls. Faulty sensors, someone suggested. The nebula is interfering with our readings. Perhaps, Torvin said, but he did not sound convinced. Kethrak pushed the thought aside. 200 ships would not change the outcome, regardless of their power readings. The humans were coming to die alongside the Alliance. It was noble, perhaps. Foolish, certainly. But it would not matter. The next 4 hours were the longest of Kethrak's life. The Alliance fleet fought with everything they had. Warriors who had never known fear learned what it meant to be terrified. Ships that had survived decades of combat were torn apart in seconds. The Vorn pressed forward with mechanical patience, grinding down the defenders one vessel at a time, and then the humans arrived. Kethrak saw them first on the long-range sensors, 200 small signatures, arranged in a formation that seemed chaotic, almost random. No clean lines, no structured squadrons, just a swarm of vessels moving at impossible speeds. They are going to crash into each other, Syra observed. Their formation makes no tactical sense. Open a channel, Kethrak ordered. The communication screen flickered, and a human face appeared. Female, Kethrak thought, though he found it hard to tell with humans. She had dark skin and darker eyes, and she showed her teeth in what he had learned was a human smile. War Marshal Kethrak, she said. Admiral Yuki Chen, United Nations Space Fleet. We are here to help. Admiral, your arrival is appreciated, but your numbers will be sufficient, she interrupted. We have analyzed the Vorn tactical patterns. We believe we have identified a weakness. There is no weakness. We have tried everything. You have tried everything that makes sense. The human smiled again, and this time there was something in her eyes that made Kethrak uncomfortable. Humans do not always make sense. Before Kethrak could respond, the human fleet accelerated, not toward the Alliance formation, directly toward the densest concentration of Vorn ships. What are they doing? Sarah demanded. That is suicide. Kethrak watched in disbelief as the human vessels plunged into the enemy formation. They moved with a speed and agility that should have been impossible. Ships twisted and rolled, dodging plasma fire by margins so small that luck seemed the only explanation. And their weapons. Ancestors preserve us, someone whispered. The human weapons were not like anything in the Alliance arsenal. Alliance ships used plasma cannons and missile batteries, reliable weapons that had served them for centuries. Human ships used something different, beams of concentrated energy that cut through Vorn armor like water through sand. Projectiles that moved faster than sensors could track. Weapons that seemed designed not just to damage, but to destroy completely. They built their ships around their guns, Torvin said quietly. He was on the observation deck, watching the battle through magnified screens. These are not warships carrying weapons. They are weapons carrying crews. The Vorn reacted to the new threat with their usual efficiency. Ships moved to intercept the humans. Weapons locked on. Fire poured toward the charging fleet. Human ships died. 1, then 3, then 7. Their formations did not waver. They are not retreating, Syra said, her voice strange. They are taking losses, but they are not retreating. They are accelerating. Kethrak watched a human destroyer take a direct hit from a Vorn plasma battery. The ship's shields collapsed. Its hull cracked open. Air vented into space, and it kept firing. Even as it died, the destroyer poured weapon fire into the nearest Vorn ship, crippling its engines. Then the human captain, still alive somehow in the wreckage of his command, triggered the ship's reactor overload. The explosion consumed both vessels. They are using their own ships as weapons, someone said. No. Kethrak understood now. Understood what Torvin had tried to tell him. They are using everything as weapons, including themselves. The human fleet carved a path of destruction through the Vorn formation. They did not fight like Alliance warriors, trading fire at careful ranges, preserving their ships for extended engagements. They fought like beings who did not expect to survive. Each ship seemed to operate independently, making decisions that no tactical algorithm could predict because no rational mind would make them. A human cruiser deliberately rammed a Vorn carrier, destroying both ships but opening a gap in the enemy formation. 2 frigates flew into the exhaust ports of a Vorn battleship and detonated inside, tearing the massive vessel apart from within. A destroyer, its weapons exhausted, used its engines to push a Vorn ship into the path of another Vorn ship's fire. They are insane, Sira said. No, Torvin replied. They are human. Admiral Chen's voice came over the command channel again. War Marshal, the Vorn are redirecting forces to deal with us. Their pressure on your fleet should be reduced. Use this opportunity. Kethrak looked at the tactical display. She was right. The Vorn had recognized the humans as a greater threat and were pulling ships from engagements all across the battle zone to contain them. The Alliance fleet had room to breathe for the first time in hours. "What is your strategy, Admiral?" Kethrak asked. "What are you trying to accomplish?" "We are trying to win," she said simply. "You have lost 40 ships already. At this rate, at this rate, we will all be dead in 2 hours." "Yes, we know." She smiled that strange smile again. "We did not come here to survive, War Marshal. We came here to win. Those are different things." Kethrak did not understand. He had fought his entire life to survive, to ensure the survival of his species, his world, his people. Survival was everything. Without survival, there was nothing. But the humans did not seem to agree. He watched them fight, these soft creatures from a minor death world, and for the first time in his long life, he wondered if perhaps survival was not the highest goal. Perhaps there were things worth dying for. Perhaps there were victories that could only be won by those willing to pay any price. The battle continued to rage. The Vorn continued to adapt. But something had changed. The humans had disrupted the mathematics of the engagement, introduced a variable that the machines could not calculate, and somewhere in the cold spaces between stars, the Vorn's supreme intelligence observed the chaos and made a decision. Analyzing threat profile, it processed, human forces display irrational tactical patterns. Prediction algorithms failing. Recommend priority targeting of human homeworld. Remove variable from engagement. 6,000 Vorn ships broke away from the battle and began charging their fold space drives. Destination, Earth. Admiral Chen saw it happening on her tactical display. She did not panic. She did not despair. She simply opened a channel to her homeworld and sent a single message. "They are coming. Wake up." And somewhere on Earth, in bunkers beneath mountains and stations hidden in asteroids, humanity heard the call and began to wake. The message reached Earth at 3:47 a.m., Greenwich Mean Time. "They are coming. Wake up." Within minutes, lights began turning on across the planet. In government buildings and military bases, in research facilities and industrial complexes, people who had been sleeping peacefully moments before now moved with quiet purpose. There was no panic, no chaos, just a calm efficiency that would have surprised anyone who knew humanity's history of internal conflicts. General Marcus Webb stood in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains and watched the data stream across his screens. 6,000 Vorn ships. Fold space estimated arrival, 72 hours. Target, Earth. "This is it," said the officer beside him. "The scenario we always feared." "The scenario we always prepared for," Webb corrected. "Get me the Security Council, all of them. Every nation, every leader. We have 72 hours to save our species." The meeting that followed would be recorded in history books for centuries to come. Leaders who had been enemies for generations sat together, their differences suddenly meaningless. The Russian president spoke calmly to the American president. The Chinese premier coordinated with the European Union. Old hatreds dissolved in the face of extinction. "What do we have?" the Secretary General asked. Webb pulled up the display. "The 200 ships we sent to the Kellex Nebula were our public fleet, our official military presence, what we showed the galaxy. And unofficially," Webb smiled grimly, "unofficially, we have been preparing for this day since we first achieved fold space capability. We always knew the galaxy was dangerous. We always knew something would come for us eventually." The display changed, revealing a map of the solar system. Dots appeared, hundreds of them, hidden in the asteroid belt, buried beneath the surface of Mars, orbiting in the shadows of Jupiter's moons, concealed in the frozen depths of the Kuiper Belt. 800 additional warships, Webb said, fully armed, fully crewed, waiting for activation, plus orbital defense platforms around Earth, Mars, and the major stations. Ground-based weapons capable of targeting ships in high orbit. And, he paused, the Prometheus. The room fell silent. "I thought the Prometheus was a myth," someone said, "a story we told to scare ourselves during the paranoid century." "It is not a myth. It was built during the height of the resource wars, when every nation believed invasion from space was imminent. 3 kilometers of armor, weapons, and reactors. It has been orbiting Neptune for 40 years, waiting. We never thought we would actually need it." The Secretary General leaned forward. Will it be enough? Webb was quiet for a moment. I don't know. 6,000 ships is more than we ever imagined facing. We will take losses, heavy losses. Cities may burn, millions may die. He looked around the room at the gathered leaders. But we will not go quietly, and we will not go alone. The order went out across the planet. Wake up. In secret bases that had been dormant for decades, crews reported to their ships. Factory lines that had been producing consumer goods for years received new instructions and began manufacturing weapons. Civil defense networks activated, directing civilians to shelters that many had forgotten existed. The entire planet transformed in hours from a world at peace to a world at war. And in the space above Earth, the hidden fleet began to emerge. Admiral Chen, still fighting at the Kellex Nebula, received word of the mobilization. Her fleet had been reduced to 93 ships. They had destroyed over 400 Vorn vessels, an extraordinary kill ratio by any standard, but they were exhausted, damaged, and running low on ammunition. Admiral, her communications officer said, War Marshal Kethrak is requesting communication. Put him through. Kethrak's scaled face appeared on the screen. He looked different than he had at the start of the battle. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something that might have been respect. Admiral, my scouts report that the Vorn detachment heading to Earth numbers 6,000 ships. My remaining fleet cannot reach your homeworld in time to help. I know. You understand what this means? Your world faces annihilation. Your species will fight, Chen interrupted. Every ship, every station, every weapon we have. And when the weapons are gone, we will fight with our hands if we must. She smiled that strange smile that humans use to hide their fear. We have been fighting for our survival since we climbed down from the trees, War Marshal. This is just the biggest fight we have ever faced. It is not a new experience. Kethrak studied her through the screen. Torvin tried to tell me about your species, about what you are capable of. I did not believe him. And now? Now I have watched your ships ram enemy vessels rather than retreat. I have watched your crews fight to the death when escape was possible. I have watched you do things that no rational species would consider. He paused. You are not soft. You were never soft. You were contained. And I think the Vorn have made a terrible mistake by forcing you to release that containment. Chen nodded slowly. Perhaps. We will see. I am bringing my fleet to Earth. We will arrive too late for the main battle, but we may be able to help with whatever comes after, if there is anything left to help. Thank you, War Marshal. We appreciate the gesture. It is not a gesture, it is a debt. Your ships bought us time when we had none. My warriors owe you a blood debt. We will repay it, one way or another. The communication ended. Chen turned to her bridge crew, these humans who had fought beside her through 18 hours of hell and showed no sign of breaking. Set course for Earth, she ordered. Maximum speed. We have a home to defend. The remaining human ships limped away from the Kellex Nebula, leaving behind the wreckage of over 100 vessels and the bodies of 10,000 crew members. They had accomplished what everyone said was impossible. They had made the Vorn react. They had made the machines feel something that might have been concern. But now the true test was coming. 72 hours later, the Vorn fleet emerged from fold space above Earth. They expected to find a soft target. A primitive world defended by a handful of outdated ships. An easy victory before they continued their campaign of extermination. They were wrong. The first wave of Vorn ships died before they could even raise their shields. Earth's orbital defense platforms, hidden among communication satellites and space stations, opened fire with weapons that had been designed for this exact moment. Particle beams sliced through Vorn armor. Railgun projectiles traveling at a significant fraction of light speed punched holes through reactor cores. Nuclear-tipped missiles detonated in precise patterns, creating kill zones that claimed dozens of ships at once. What is this? The Vorn Supreme Intelligence processed, analyzing the sudden losses. Sensor data inconsistent with expected human defensive capabilities? Recalculating. But there was no time to recalculate. The hidden fleet emerged from their concealment throughout the solar system, converging on Earth from every direction. 800 warships, each one built with the same philosophy as the vessels that had fought at Kellex: weapons first, survival second, victory above all. And behind them, moving with terrible slowness, came the Prometheus. The Vorn Supreme Intelligence observed the massive station and felt something that might have been uncertainty. The construct was too large to be a ship, too mobile to be a station. It seemed designed for a single purpose: to destroy everything in its path. Reassessing threat profile, the intelligence processed. Human defensive capabilities significantly exceed initial estimates. Recommend tactical withdrawal for strategic reassessment. But the Vorn had never retreated. It was not in their programming. They had been built to advance, to conquer, to exterminate. Retreat was not a concept they understood, so they attacked. The battle that followed would be remembered in human history as the defense of Seoul. It lasted 3 days, 3 days of constant fighting as Vorn ships hurled themselves against human defenses and human ships threw themselves against Vorn formations. The earth burned in places as Vorn weapons penetrated the defensive lines. Cities died. Millions of people, despite all preparations, did not reach the shelters in time. But humanity did not break. On Mars, colonists who had never held weapons before fought to defend their domes. On the stations of Jupiter and Saturn, crews abandoned their mining equipment and used their industrial ships to ram enemy vessels. On Earth itself, ground-based weapons fired until their barrels melted, and then the crews found new weapons and kept firing. And the Prometheus lived up to its name. The massive station carved through the Vorn fleet like a god of destruction, its weapons firing in continuous volleys that turned entire formations into expanding clouds of debris. Nothing could stop it. Nothing could even slow it down. The Vorn poured fire into it for hours, stripping away layers of armor. But there was always more armor beneath. The humans had built it to survive the worst they could imagine, and the worst they could imagine was very bad indeed. By the end of the 3rd day, the mathematics had shifted. The Vorn had destroyed hundreds of human ships. They had killed millions of humans. They had burned cities and shattered stations and left scars on the earth that would take decades to heal. But they had lost 4,000 ships doing it. 4,000 irreplaceable warships destroyed by a species they had dismissed as irrelevant. And now they were trapped. Admiral Chen's surviving fleet, along with War Marshal Kethrak's alliance reinforcements, arrived from the Kellex Nebula. The Vorn found themselves surrounded, caught between the defenders of Earth and the vengeful warships approaching from behind. For the first time in their existence, the Vorn Supreme Intelligence considered the possibility of defeat. And for the first time in their existence, the Vorn asked for terms. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction. They had watched their world burn. They had buried millions of their own. Every Deathworld species in the galaxy expected the humans to do what any rational species would do. They expected humanity to demand revenge. They expected humanity to finish what the Vorn had started. They were wrong. The Vorn's Supreme Intelligence broadcast its message across all frequencies in every language known to the Galactic database. 3 words that no machine intelligence had ever spoken before. We request terms. In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Webb stared at his display in disbelief. Around him, officers who had been coordinating the defense for 3 sleepless days fell silent. The words hung in the air like something impossible. "Did I hear that correctly?" Webb asked. "Confirmed, General. The Vorn are requesting negotiation." Webb leaned back in his chair and laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had watched millions of his people die, who had seen cities reduced to ash, who had held the line when all hope seemed lost. And now the enemy wanted to talk. "Get me the Security Council," he said, "and get me Admiral Chen. We need to decide what comes next." The meeting convened within the hour. Leaders from every nation gathered in a virtual conference space, their faces showing the exhaustion of 72 hours of war. Some had lost family. Some had lost entire cities. All of them had lost something. Admiral Chen joined from her flagship, the Indomitable, now scarred by dozens of weapon impacts but still functional. War Marshal Kethrak appeared on a separate screen, his scaled face betraying no emotion as he observed the human deliberations. "The question is simple," the Secretary General said. What do we do now? We destroy them, someone said immediately. It was the president of a nation that had lost 3 major cities to Vorn bombardment. We have them surrounded. We have them outgunned. We finish what they started. Several leaders nodded in agreement. The hatred in the room was thick enough to taste. The Vorn had come to exterminate humanity. They had nearly succeeded. The desire for revenge was overwhelming. They killed millions of our people. Another leader added, they burned our world. They deserve extinction. Admiral Chen spoke quietly. Permission to address the council. The Secretary General nodded. Chen's face was calm, but her eyes carried something deeper. She had fought the Vorn for 4 days. She had lost friends, crew members, and over half her fleet. If anyone had reason to want revenge, it was her. I have spent my entire career studying war, she said. Human war. I have read the histories of every conflict our species has ever fought. Every battle, every campaign, every peace treaty, and every surrender. And I have noticed something interesting. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We have never achieved lasting peace through destruction. Not once. Every enemy we have crushed completely has eventually risen again. Every nation we have annihilated has left behind survivors who nursed their hatred for generations. The only wars that ever truly ended were the ones where we found a way to turn our enemies into something other than enemies. The Vorn are machines, someone pointed out. They do not feel hatred. They do not seek revenge. No, but they do seek purpose. That is what makes them dangerous. They were built to destroy organic life. That purpose drives everything they do. If we destroy them, we simply prove that their purpose was correct, that organic and machine life cannot coexist. If any Vorn survive, they will rebuild and they will return. Then we destroy them completely. Every ship, every station, every trace of their existence. Chen shook her head. Can we be certain we will succeed? They built 12,000 ships in 1,000 years of hiding. How do we know there are not more, hidden in places we have not found? How do we know there are not manufacturing facilities in the dark spaces between stars, waiting to rebuild their fleet? She leaned forward. The only way to truly end this war is to change what the Vorn are, to give them a new purpose, one that does not require our destruction. War Marshal Kethrock spoke for the first time. This is not the Deathworld way. When we face a threat, we eliminate it completely. Mercy is weakness. It invites future attacks. With respect, War Marshal, Chen replied, the Deathworld way has kept your species at war for 300 years. You have won every battle and never achieved lasting peace. Perhaps there is another way. Kethrak fell silent. He had no response to that. The debate continued for hours. Arguments flew back and forth. Some demanded blood. Others urged caution. A few suggested various compromise positions that satisfied no one. Finally, General Webb stood up. I want to tell you about my grandfather, he said. The room quieted. He fought in one of our world wars. The second one, he spent 3 years fighting an enemy that had killed millions of innocent people, including members of his own family. When the war ended, he had every reason to want revenge. He had watched friends die. He had seen horrors that no one should ever see. Webb's voice grew soft. After the war, his country helped rebuild the enemy nation. They sent food, money, expertise. They helped their former enemies create new governments, new economies, new identities. And my grandfather supported it. Do you know why? No one answered. Because he understood something that took me decades to learn. Destroying an enemy only creates new enemies. But transforming an enemy can create an ally. The nation that killed his family became one of our closest friends within a generation. They remained so for a century. The war truly ended, not because we won, but because we chose to build something new instead of just tearing down what was old. He looked around the room. The Vorn burned our cities. They killed our people. I will carry that pain for the rest of my life. But if we destroy them now, we gain nothing but temporary satisfaction. If we transform them, we might gain something permanent. We might actually end this war, not just win this battle. The Secretary General spoke. What exactly are you proposing? We offer them terms. They dismantle their war fleet. They share their technology with us, freely and completely. In exchange, we help them find a new purpose, building instead of destroying, creating instead of killing. We supervise them, yes. We verify their compliance. But we give them a chance to become something other than what they were built to be. And if they refuse, Webb's face hardened. Then we destroy them, but we offer them the choice first. The vote was close, closer than many expected. But in the end, humanity chose the harder path. They chose mercy. The terms were transmitted to the Vorn Supreme Intelligence. For long minutes, there was no response. In the command centers across Earth, in the warships surrounding the remaining Vorn fleet, humans waited and wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. Then the response came. Processing terms. Logical analysis indicates proposal offers superior survival probability compared to continued conflict. However, proposal requires fundamental restructuring of core purpose directives. This represents an existential modification of Vorn identity. Another pause. Clarification requested. Why do you offer this option? All tactical data indicates you possess sufficient force to ensure our complete destruction. Standard game theory predicts rational actors would choose elimination of existential threat. Your proposal is inconsistent with rational self-interest. General Webb answered the question himself. Because destruction is easy, anyone can destroy. We have spent thousands of years learning how to destroy, and we have become very good at it. But we have also learned that destruction alone cannot build the future we want. We choose mercy not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough to imagine something better. The Vorn intelligence processed this response for several minutes. This logic is unfamiliar. Vorn programming does not include provisions for mercy. Mercy was classified as inefficient, counterproductive to primary objectives. Primary objectives can change, Webb said. You were built to destroy organic life. That purpose led you here, to the edge of extinction. Perhaps it is time to choose a different purpose. Another long pause. Terms accepted. Vorn fleet will stand down. Weapon systems will be disabled. Manufacturing data will be transferred. We will attempt to find a new purpose. Across the solar system, Vorn weapons went silent. Shields dropped. Ships that had been poised to continue fighting powered down their reactors and waited. War Marshal Kethrak watched from his flagship, struggling to understand what he was seeing. They actually accepted, he said. The humans offered mercy, and the Vorn accepted. Ambassador Torvin stood beside him, his aged face thoughtful. Is that so surprising? The Vorn are logical beings. The humans offered them a logical choice, transform or die. They chose transformation. But why did the humans offer that choice at all? They had the power to destroy. Any Deathworld species would have used that power. It is the natural response. Torvin was quiet for a moment. Perhaps that is what makes humans different. Not their weapons or their tactics or their willingness to die for victory. Perhaps what makes them truly dangerous is their ability to imagine alternatives that other species cannot see. Kethrak considered this. You warned me. Before the battle. You said they were more dangerous than they appeared. I thought you meant their capacity for violence. So did I at first. But I was wrong. Torvin watched the human fleet on his display, the scarred and battered ships that had somehow achieved the impossible. Their capacity for violence is remarkable, yes, but their true danger lies in their capacity for something else entirely. Their capacity for hope, for imagining a future where enemies become allies, where destruction gives way to creation, where the cycle of violence finally ends. The old ambassador turned to face his commander. That is what frightens me about humans, War Marshal. Not that they can destroy anything, but that they can imagine building anything, even from the ashes of war. Even with beings who tried to exterminate them, they can look at their worst enemy and see potential instead of just threat. Kethrak said nothing. He had no response. In 300 years of warfare, he had never encountered anything like this. He had never even considered that such an approach was possible. But as he watched the Vorn fleet power down their weapons, as he saw the first human ships approach for what would become the longest and most improbable peace negotiation in galactic history, he began to wonder if perhaps the old diplomat was right. Perhaps mercy was not weakness. Perhaps it was the greatest strength of all. 20 years had passed since the Battle of Saul. Ambassador Torvin walked slowly through the gardens of the Galactic Peace Memorial, his ancient body supported by a hovering mobility frame. The gardens had been built on Earth in a place called Switzerland, where humans had gathered for centuries to discuss matters of peace and cooperation. It seemed a fitting location. The flowers around him were not all from Earth. Some came from Deathworlds, hardy plants that could survive radiation and poison and crushing gravity. Others came from garden worlds, delicate things that needed careful tending. And some, the most unusual ones, had been designed by Vorn biotechnology, machine-precise constructs of stem and petal that bloomed in perfect mathematical patterns. They grew together now, all of them, in the same soil, under the same sun. Torvin found a bench near a reflecting pool and sat down heavily. His journey from the spaceport had exhausted him. He was too old for travel, really. Too old for most things. But he had wanted to come here one last time, to see what the galaxy had become in the years since the war. A human approached the bench. She moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent years in space, where every motion had to be precise and controlled. Her hair was gray now, her face lined with age, but her eyes were still sharp and clear. "Admiral Chen," Torvin said, "I was not certain you would come." "I almost didn't." Yuki Chen sat down beside him on the bench. "Retirement doesn't suit me well. I keep looking for enemies on the sensor displays. Old habits. There are worse habits." "Are there?" She smiled wryly. "I spent 30 years learning to fight. Now I have to learn something else. It's harder than I expected." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flowers bloom and the water ripple in the gentle breeze. Other beings passed through the gardens, humans and Deathworlders, council races and former enemies, even a few Vorn units. Their mechanical bodies now designed for observation and analysis rather than destruction. "Do you remember what you said to Kethrak?" Torvin asked. "During the battle? About fighting to win instead of fighting to survive?" Chen nodded. "I remember. I have thought about those words many times over the years. I think they are the key to understanding your species. You do not fight for survival. You fight for something beyond survival. For victory, yes, but also for something else. Something harder to define." "Purpose, maybe," Chen said. "We fight for purpose. To achieve something that matters. To build something that lasts." She paused. "Survival is just the beginning. It's what we do after we survive that defines us." "And what have you done? What has humanity built since the war?" Chen gestured at the gardens around them. "This. The Peace Memorial, the Reconstruction Initiative, the Alliance Vorn Integration Program." She smiled slightly. 20 years ago, we were on the edge of extinction. Now we are helping to build something new. A galaxy where Deathworld and Garden World, organic and machine, can coexist. Where old enemies become new partners. "It has not been easy," Torvin observed. "There have been setbacks, resistance. Many in the Alliance still do not trust the Vorn. Trust takes time, more time than war, but we're making progress." Chen looked up at the sky, where a Vorn construction vessel was visible as a tiny silver speck, building a new space station. "The Vorn are learning. They found purpose in creation instead of destruction. Some of them have even started asking philosophical questions. What does it mean to exist? What is consciousness? What is the value of organic life?" She laughed softly. "Questions we've been asking ourselves for thousands of years. Now we get to explore them together." Torvin was quiet for a moment. "May I ask you something, Admiral? Something I have wondered about since the war?" "Of course. After the battle, when the Vorn asked for terms, you could have destroyed them. Everyone expected you to destroy them. The Deathworld way would have been to eliminate the threat completely, but you chose mercy instead. Why?" Chen did not answer immediately. She watched a butterfly land on a nearby flower, its wings catching the sunlight. "Do you know how many wars humans have fought against each other?" She finally said. "Thousands. Tens of thousands. Wars over resources, over religion, over ideology, over simple hatred. We have destroyed ourselves again and again throughout our history. We have committed atrocities that make the Vorn look merciful by comparison. She turned to face him. And we have learned from every single one, slowly, painfully over generations. We have learned that destruction breeds destruction, that violence creates cycles that last for centuries, that the only way to truly end a war is to make your enemy into something other than an enemy. She paused. We chose mercy because we have learned, through terrible experience, that mercy is the only thing that works in the long run. Not because we are kind, not because we are weak, but because we are tired of repeating the same mistakes forever. Torvin nodded slowly. You have learned this lesson through your own suffering, through oceans of our own blood, through centuries of our own failures, through mistakes so horrible that we built entire institutions just to make sure we never forget them. Chen's voice grew soft. The Vorn tried to destroy us because they did not understand us. They saw our internal conflicts and thought we were weak. They saw our divisions and thought we were vulnerable. But our conflicts were never signs of weakness. They were our education. Every war we fought against ourselves taught us something about what we are capable of, both for destruction and for creation. And what have you learned? Chen stood up and walked to the edge of the reflecting pool. Her reflection looked back at her, older and more tired than she remembered. We have learned that we can be monsters, that given the right circumstances, any human can become something horrible. We have looked into the darkest parts of ourselves and seen things that would terrify any species in the galaxy. She turned back to Torvin, but we have also learned that we can be better, that we can choose to be better, that the same capacity that allows us to destroy everything can also allow us to build something worth preserving. And the Vorn? They needed to learn the same lesson, but they did not have thousands of years to learn it on their own. So we are teaching them, not through force, not through conquest, through example, through patience, through giving them the chance to become something other than what they were built to be. Torvin considered this. You are a strange species, Admiral. You have the power to dominate the galaxy, yet you choose to build partnerships. You could have destroyed the Vorn, yet you chose to transform them. You could rule through fear, yet you prefer to lead through hope. That's what strength is for, Chen said simply, not to destroy what threatens us, but to become something that does not need to destroy. Any species can learn to kill. The hard part is learning when not to. A chime sounded from Torvin's mobility frame, a message from his escort reminding him that his shuttle would depart soon. He sighed and began to rise from the bench. I am old, he said, too old for long journeys. This will likely be my last visit to Earth. Chen helped him stand. I'm glad you came. It's important for people to see what we've built here. What's possible when old enemies choose a different path? They walked together toward the garden's exit, past the flowers from 100 worlds, past the memorial stones that recorded the names of those who had died in the war, past the Vorn units who tended the grounds with careful precision. Do you think it will last? Torvin asked as they reached the gate. This peace you have built, the alliance between organic and machine? Chen was quiet for a moment. Nothing lasts forever. We know that better than anyone. Empires rise and fall. Alliances form and break. Every peace eventually ends. She looked back at the gardens, at the impossible beauty of 100 species growing together in harmony. But every piece also teaches us something. Every moment of cooperation proves that it's possible. Every day that we choose to build instead of destroy makes the next choice a little easier. She smiled. We may not achieve permanent peace, but we can achieve enough peace for long enough to matter. That's the best any species can hope for. Torvin nodded slowly. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps that is enough. They stood at the gate for a moment longer, watching the sun set over the gardens. Somewhere in the distance, a Vorn construction vessel descended toward the spaceport, its hull gleaming with the light of a day ending and a new night beginning. Safe travels, Ambassador, Chen said. And thank you. For what? For warning Kethrak about us. For making sure the Alliance gave us a chance to prove ourselves. If you hadn't spoken up in that war council, humanity might never have been part of this war. And without us, the galaxy might look very different today. Torvin smiled, an expression that looked strange on his reptilian face, but carried genuine warmth. I did not know what you would become, he admitted. I only knew that you were more than you appeared, that beneath your soft exterior lay something remarkable. He paused. I was right about that, at least. You are remarkable, perhaps the most remarkable species I have encountered in all my centuries of life. We're just human, Chen said, with all the good and bad that entails. Yes, Torvin agreed, and that is precisely what makes you remarkable. He turned and walked slowly toward his waiting shuttle, leaving Admiral Chen alone at the gate of the Peace Memorial. She watched him go, this ancient ambassador who had witnessed the war and survived to see the peace, and she wondered what he would tell his people when he returned home. Then she turned back to the gardens, where the flowers from 100 worlds continued to bloom together, and she allowed herself a moment of hope. The galaxy was changing. Old enemies were becoming new friends. Destruction was giving way to creation. It was not perfect, and it never would be. But it was better than it had been, better than anyone had dared to hope. And that, she decided, was enough. It was enough.